Hello and welcome to Grouchy Geeks episode 67. My name's Scott, otherwise known as the new number 2, and joining me, as always, it's number 6. It's Steve himself.
I'm not a number. I'm a man. If no one knows what we're going on about, go and watch The Prisoner.
Yes.
The old version, the original, not the new thing.
The Jim Caviezel one, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, it was all right, but it just was like very, Jim Caviezel-y.
The reason for bringing it up is I've just been on holiday and we went to Port Merion, which is where The Prisoner was filmed. And it's an amazing place to go because it's not a TV set, but it's like walking onto the set of The Prisoner. It hasn't changed, and I've been watching The Prisoner since, and it hasn't changed at all. It's like walking into the village. If you don't know The Prisoner, it's about a spy that resigns, and then they sort of kidnap him to this place called the Village to try and find out why he resigned. And it's very interesting and very surreal. And it was filmed in this really unusual location that hasn't changed since 1966 when they first filmed the show. An amazing experience. But they're not allowed names anymore. They're all given numbers. Patrick McGowan, who's a star, is number 6, and his adversary is number 2. And obviously, being of the adversarial type, I now have a badge that says number 2 on it, and I'm drinking a beer that says number 2 on it as well.
Excellent. Yes, if this was a video cast, that's what you'll be able to see.
Yeah.
So, news. We say this every time. This was a very thin month for interesting news. There's a lot of rubbish I don't want to talk about. Have you found much?
I've got a couple of little things. Something I don't think I've ever done on this show is I want to give a very quick shout out because somebody that works in the same place as me mentioned to me that he's been listening to episodes and he's now caught up, and he was so excited to find fellow fans of Space Above and Beyond. Because I don't think he's ever found one before. So Russ, when you come to listen to this episode in maybe 6 to 12 months' time, then hello.
Hello. And remember, I am, of course, the Angriest Angel, abandon all hope, and I do own a mug, a T-shirt, and the first season and the only season on DVD. So there you go. Yes,
brilliant.
Huge fan of Space Above and Beyond. Great. Well, that might be due for a reboot, a refresh, a rebrand. Who knows at this point?
It really deserves it, right? I think, and I think it would do well with a reboot. And like, why bother rebooting something that was? Don't get me wrong, I love the original Space Above and Beyond, but why bother rebooting Spider-Man for the 20th time? Why not reboot something that is a great premise, but didn't quite meet the mark the first time round? Yeah. And Space Above and Beyond would be perfect for that.
They did it with Battlestar, and they brought it back, and it was grittier, and it was basically Space Above and Beyond was a predecessor to what the new Battlestar became, but it did years before, and they only had the one season. So if they did it again, I think it could be great. I mean, it has all the same things. It's got people in fighter planes. It's got a hostile AI. It's got an aliens race, in this case, that aren't connected to the AI, that is something completely different. And there's a war in space, and there's pilots, and it's brilliant. It is ripe at this time to do something. But I guess, like everything else, the rights are tied up, and whether or not they want to do it and so on. But I would like to see it, to be honest. I think it would be great. So that's my first bit of news. And this is weird. But the more I read about it, the more I thought, if this could be true, and it could either be brilliant or absolutely the worst thing ever I've ever heard. Okay. So as we know, Jodie Whittaker is leaving Doctor Who. She's going to regenerate at the end of the current run, season, whatever it is. And showrunner Chris Chibnall is also leaving later this year, 2022. You'll never guess who is rumored to be the next incarnation of Doctor Who. A British actor, I'll give you that. He has been in a number of TV shows and many, many films. Many films. A slightly older gentleman than perhaps you might expect.
I'll tell you where my mind's going. I guarantee you it's wrong. I'll tell you where my brain's going, though.
Go on.
And it would be brilliant. Warwick Davis.
I wish. So here's the rumor. Hugh Grant.
Wow. That's
So Russell T Davies worked with Hugh Grant back in the early 2000s on A Very English Scandal, and he offered Hugh Grant the role back in 2005, and that he turned it down, obviously. But apparently what they want to do with Doctor Who is expand the franchise and build out from the Doctor and have many other spin-off shows, just as he started to do, Russell T, back in the day with Torchwood, the Sarah Jane Adventures, and other things, and he started doing it. But apparently Sony has bought a stake in Bad Wolf Productions, which is the production company that runs Doctor Who for the BBC. So if this is true, he would become the Doctor. He'd meet other various characters during the show, and if there's interesting ones, they would then spin off into their own kind of, Torchwood something else show, and they want to grow it into this new Who-universe, whatever, TARDIS-iverse, it's bigger on the inside than the outside, and make it this franchise that it started to be when Russell T first did it. And that's the rumor, and that apparently Hugh Grant did play the Doctor in a Red Nose Day special back in like 1999.
Yes, he did. So it had Hugh Grant, it had Julie Sawalha, and it had
Rowan Atkinson
in it
Richard
as well.
E. Grant, Jim Broadbent, and Joanna Lumley, all of them who played Doctor Who, apparently.
Yeah.
So they're sort of saying all of this, there's lots of things swirling, and the fact that Sony want to do more with it and they want to grow it into a thing, and they've got money in the pot now and have other spin-offs. I'm thinking what sounded ridiculous might actually not be, because if you think about some of the older Doctors now, before the new kind of return and before Sylvester McCoy, they all had that slightly quirky, weird, very English gentleman, slightly older thing. And Hugh is now at that phase where he could pull that off, and he's a bit kind of wacky.
And there's kind of a precedent, I think, because like you were saying, Russell T Davies has worked with Hugh Grant in the past.
Yeah.
And I believe that Russell T Davies was attached to the movie version of a play called The History Boys, which starred Matt Smith, who was the third Doctor. But they tend to, they've always, I actually don't know how famous Jodie Whittaker was before she became the Doctor, but they've tended to employ people that weren't especially famous. Like Tom Baker wasn't really famous. Peter Davison was a bit, I guess. But this is the first time, as far as I know, that a really like A-list celebrity, albeit A-list a long time ago, has been attached to the role. And it's an interesting idea.
So if you think about his role in Paddington, where he plays that batshit guy with all the different costumes, and he's very sort of zany, and you think, yeah, all right, I can see it, like an expansion of that character, someone who's got a bit of a screw loose. He could do that very well. and play the English gentleman very to the hilt, because that's what he's very, very good at. And I sort of thought, maybe it could be real, and maybe it could then lead to all sorts of other things.
I mean, Russell T Davies is the person that saved Doctor Who, right? Not even saved Doctor Who.
Brought it back.
It was dead. So he didn't just save it. You're right. He resurrected it. And as has been shown many, many times in the past, these people know a lot more about good casting than I ever will. So if that's the name that he ends up with, I've got faith that he'll it's the right casting for the role. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I would have gone through every single English person I could think of.
Idris Elba, no. Warwick Davis again, still not Warwick Davis. Yeah, so I don't know. So that's the rumor. It could be true. It could be brilliant, or it could be terrible. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I'm excited to see if they bring this kind of Hugh universe, spin off lots of different things. That could be an interesting thing. So watch this space, basically. Anyway, what news do you have?
So this isn't a piece of news that I read at all. This is just something that I noticed and caught me by surprise. I presume you know this, and I guess more about the history of it than I do. But I was sort of browsing through Disney Plus a few days ago, and all of the Marvel shows that I think of as being Netflix Marvel shows are now on Disney Plus, and I just never imagined that was ever going to be a thing. And it's, as far as I could tell, it's all of them. So Daredevil's on there, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, the whole
Iron
lot.
Fist, Punisher.
Yeah, it just suddenly appeared on there, and I never. It took me completely by surprise, because I never even imagined that would be on the cards.
So it's because Netflix's license or whatever it was ran out,
right?
And when that happened, it meant Disney and Marvel could use the characters in other places. Hence, small spoiler for those who haven't seen Spider-Man Far From Home. Have you seen it, Scott, before I spoil something?
Spoil away, I don't care.
Okay, there's a tiny, tiny cameo in the new Spider-Man film from Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't have done this while the rights were held by Netflix.
Right.
So when it expired, people were saying, oh, does that mean we're going to get Charlie Cox back as Daredevil? And they were like, no, maybe one day, we'll see, maybe. And they asked Kevin Feige, and he said, if I was ever going to do it again, it would be Charlie Cox, because he's my Daredevil. And I was like, oh. And then, of course, he appeared in that scene in the film. Right. And we've had Vincent D'Onofrio appear as Kingpin again in Hawkeye TV series. It's like, ooh. And now all the shows have come over to Disney now. So I'm thinking, are they building up to a new Daredevil again on Disney Plus?
It took me totally, but I was just like browsing through, and it said Daredevil, and I thought, oh, that must be the Ben Affleck Daredevil. Is it Ben Affleck?
Yep, it was. Ben Affleck.
That must be the Ben Affleck Daredevil.
Yeah,
and I went into it, and it wasn't. And then I noticed Luke Cage and Jessica Jones.
Yeah,
and it was. I had no idea that was going to happen. And it happened completely silently, but they're all there now.
Yes, I look forward to watching some of them again. Not all of them, that's for sure.
Yeah, not Iron Fist so much.
Not so much. Didn't finish Jessica Jones either, but there you go. So here's a bit of news that I know you'll be keen to hear. Here's the title of the headline, right? Discovery Season 5 to embrace old Trek. What would you guess that might be about?
I mean, when you say to embrace, what I actually hear is to piss all over.
Ironically, no, from what I'm reading between the lines, no. So the 4th season of Star Trek Discovery, or to give its proper name, STD, has recently wrapped up. And there's a new sort of showrunner. And here's what they've said. They've put, for season 5, they'll be continuing to rebuild the Federation, blah, blah. But the show's continuing move away from franchise shepherd Alex Kurtzman's darker and more action-centric new Trek era. So it's sort of saying there's this old version of Star Trek that exists, the good version, and there's this new version that's been created by Alex. There's a lot of things we love about the old version, so it's pulling from there. So what I read is, the show's a piece of shit. It's really not doing very well. We're going to go back to how it was good. Therefore, we're moving back to old Trek and away from Alex Kurtzman, who made it into an absolute pile.
I mean, I'll believe it when I see it. I have zero faith in that show.
I gave up on it ages ago. But it's just ironic that there's suddenly, with season 5, they're embracing the old version of it, or more classic tone. And I'm thinking, interesting that. Interesting twist. I wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, good luck to them. I hope it ends up great. But that show.
I had to stop. I couldn't bear it, and I gave up. So it was so ridiculous. It was such a Mary Sue, the main character. So it was a mess. Anyway, what other news do you have?
So it's not necessarily, well, it isn't all that interesting, but I watched the new trailer for the new Obi-Wan TV show.
Yes.
And it actually looks kind of interesting. I think they've got the right person to play Obi-Wan. And it's happening during an interesting era. It's when, he's on Tatooine. He's there to sort of be in the background and protect young Luke. And it seems like an interesting idea. I'll be honest, it's not so interesting that I'll be there watching it on day one. But it's kind of, there's something curious about it. I'm probably more interested in it than, The Mandalorian was great, but it's probably got me more interested than Star Wars has in a long time, I think.
Yeah. So I saw an interview today with Ewan McGregor saying that he hadn't, he stayed in touch with Hayden Christensen, but it wasn't until he got onto the set to do a reading with some of the other actors. He learned his part, and he went out and he had the script and he looked up and it was Hayden Christensen. And he's like, we haven't been face to face in years.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they've got him back, like almost 20 years on from episode 2 and 3 when they worked together. So he's coming back as a young Vader after episode 3 and the massacre and all the Jedi are gone and blah, blah, blah. But it's just like, he said it felt like a lot of time and no time had passed. And it fell into a familiar rhythm again. So it's also good that it's a limited series. I think it's only like 6 or 8 episodes. And Ewan McGregor does a lot of films. I can't see him be like, I'll do one of these every year for the next 5 years. I think it might just be like a one-off, maybe. But it does look interesting. You're right. It's an interesting era. It's just an interesting period, and some interesting potential stories about him as a young Obi-Wan, younger than what we saw in episode 4. So, curious. Definitely curious. I'll have to see. The only other bit of news I had was also connected to the Star Wars universe, is that Christopher Lloyd has apparently joined the cast for season 3 of The Mandalorian.
What? That's interesting.
Yeah, so his part has been kept under wraps. They've said it's only going to be a guest starring role. He's not going to be a regular role, but he's going to be in, probably a couple of episodes of the 3rd season, which I find very interesting because we had like Werner Herzog in season,
that was strange,
which was absolutely batshit. You're there going, wait, that guy looks a bit like Werner Herzog. He sounds a bit like him. Oh my God, it is him. So having Christopher Lloyd turn up is fascinating what he might do, because I recently saw him in the film Nobody, and that was fun. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, he's been cropping up doing bits and pieces the last few years.
If Christopher Lloyd shows up in a DeLorean,
I've traveled back from. Wait, I've gone too far. Oh, Marty, what are we doing? Oh well. Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm going to wait and see, but I am curious. And Boba Fett was. Did he watch Book of Boba Fett?
I will get around to it at some point. But
first half is proper wobbly. Honestly, it's very, very. But second half feels like a different show, and I won't spoil it. There's a massive kind of pivot, and you go, all right, okay. So it's worth seeing for if you're a completist.
I have never ever understood the obsession that people have with Boba Fett. To me, he was just like a very minor character in a couple of the films. But I used to live with somebody. This is a long time ago, but I used to live with a guy who was proper obsessed with Boba Fett, and I could never understand it. I could never understand why Boba Fett was the source of all of this adulation and obsession. And he used to, he had a Boba Fett costume that he used to go to conventions in, and it's like
this friend, Scott. Do you want to? Was this friend you? In fact,
if I'd have said any other character in the Star Wars universe, then that would have been plausible. But the Boba Fett thing is just beyond me.
It is unusual because he was a masked character and he's in his cool armor, and we didn't really know much about him. So I guess I can understand some of the obsession, but yeah, it is a little peculiar.
But I will get around to watching it at some point. But I'm really not in a rush.
Yeah, it's yeah. So I'm curious the Mandalorian to come back, and if you're going to watch the new series of Mandalorian, which will be later this year or next year, read a summary perhaps of Boba Fett just so you get up to speed. I think it's worth doing. Anyway, that's all the news I had. Do you have any more news?
No, that's it for me.
Okay, let's go on to our main feature. Welcome back for our main feature. We're going to be talking about Star Trek Picard. We've had 3 episodes so far in season 2. So we're going to talk about our initial thoughts on these first 3 episodes, where we think it's going. And there's a little bit of news in that they've already filmed season 3 and that has wrapped up. And season 3 will be the last season of Star Trek Picard. So it makes me wonder, like, is this one going to end on a cliffhanger and then it rolls straight into next season, which will be next year or something? But we'll come on to that. So,
and we should say that we decided to talk about Picard, but we've had no discussion about this at all between us.
No.
So we have no idea what each other's opinions are.
Interesting. So what did you think of it so far, Scott? What are your initial thoughts?
So there are some things about it that I really dislike, and we'll get into them, but those things are relatively minor. However, so far, I actually think it's better than season 1.
Interesting. Okay.
So what do you think?
It feels very familiar. It feels like we've had this, and it feels like it echoes some of the original series Star Trek things, where they go back in time to like the what would they have gone back to, the 70s then?
Yep.
60s and 70s, and in this case, we're back in the 21st century. Yeah, okay. And it feels like a long 3-part or 2-part we've had in Voyager as well. So I don't know. At the moment, it's not doing anything that I haven't seen 100 times. The difference is, instead of being on the street, we're obviously going to spoilers for those who haven't seen the first 3 episodes. We're going to have spoilers. I should probably say that. The difference is this time, Picard sat on the ship because, bless him, Patrick Stewart is too old to be running around, getting in fights and doing all the stuff that an action hero does in most of the Star Trek shows. When it was, Kirk and Spock or some of the other people. I don't know. At the moment, I just feel like there's threads that connect to his past at the very start, which I liked.
Mm-hmm.
Teasing things about his mother, teasing things about the Borg, and all of that was quite good. But then I thought, yeah, but we've done this too. We've done the Borg story a lot, to the point that it was so popular. Other spin-offs then started doing it. They even got it into Star Trek Enterprise at one point. And I thought, yeah, okay. I know they're a great enemy, but I don't know. At the moment, it feels like they've just written themselves into a corner to me.
So I've read, and it makes horrible sense. I've read an absolutely horrific fan theory about where they're going with the Borg stuff, and I hesitate to mention it because once you know it, you can't unknow it, and it's
the Queen in the Borg is his mother, and she was always his mother, and he did or she was originally abducted back in whatever when he was a kid, and therefore that's his actual mother. Is that the theory?
That is the theory. Yeah,
I came up with that just from the fact that you said that, and I did it in 10 seconds. If that's the actual story, that's rubbish. That took no thought at all.
But it's typical Kurtzman, right? But it's I'll tell you how it kind of makes a little bit of sense. So in the scene with his mother, where Picard is a young man in sort of like a greenhouse area with his mother.
Chateau. When he's a boy.
His mother turns to him and says, or they're having a conversation. His mother turns to him and says, "Look up." Yes. And he looks up and sees the stars and stuff like that. And then on the ship, when he encounters the Borg Queen, and the Borg Queen deliberately doesn't kill anybody, she just stuns everybody, and then she turns to Picard and says, "Look up,
look up,"
and it's. I hope more than anybody that this is wrong, but it's just the same old Kurtzman stuff. We'll see. I so hope they're not going in that direction.
Yeah. The other thing I think that where they kind of wrote themselves into a corner is that they've traveled back in time to the 21st century, and so they immediately kill off one of the most interesting characters, which is Elnor.
Yeah,
because he's a Romulan, and there were no aliens on Earth in that time. Therefore, they can't have him running around. But I'm like, have you never seen the original series with Leonard Nimoy walking around with a bandana on, covering up his eyebrows and his ears? That's all they had to do. But instead, they just kill off the character and shove him in a drawer. And what happened to the AI girl? I've forgotten her name. What happened to what's the character's name? Soji. Where's she?
So she was in a little bit in season 1, and that just seems to be like she's off doing her own stuff now.
She's some kind of like ambassador thing, because Dr. Jurati Agnes was there with her, and then they beamed Agnes back to the ship, and then they carried on. But I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess she's not in it anymore either then.
I discovered a thing earlier, and this isn't something that I read. I completely independently discovered it.
Go on.
And totally by accident. So when I was preparing for us to have this discussion, one of the things that I was going to say is I really didn't like in season 3 that they went back to 2024. Like it's good, there's been episodes where they've gone back further than that. Or they've gone into the our future, their past. But I didn't like the fact that they went to 2024 because and it's quite contemporary, and they did all of that sort of stuff, and it kind of feels like doing social commentary based on the current era is a little bit of a blunt tool. Like if you want to do social commentary about today, you don't set it today, and I didn't really like what they were doing with that. And in order to make my point, I looked up the Deep Space Nine episode where Commander Cisco, is a sci-fi writer in the 1950s.
Yes.
However, what I'd completely forgotten, and that's a 2-part episode called Far Beyond the Stars, which was directed by Avery Brooks himself, and it was very critically acclaimed. However, in trying to remind myself about that episode, I discovered another Deep Space Nine double episode that I'd totally forgotten about, called Past Tense, which causes Dr. Bashir, Commander Cisco, and Dax through a transporter accident, to go back in time. And interestingly, they end up in the year 2024, which is exactly where they're in episode 3 of Picard. But obviously the 2024 in Deep Space Nine is, 30 years in the future from when it was getting filmed. So it's slightly more dystopian than our current 2024. But if they knew this and they do some sort of crossover with Deep Space Nine, everything is forgiven.
That would be fun, but they won't. Come on, it's low-hanging fruit for some of this stuff. I think that's the problem. Okay, so I don't like what they've done with some of the characters. I do like what they've done with some of the other things. I think the actress they've got who's playing the Borg Queen, I mean, they could have asked Alice Krieg, but I suspect she probably went, I don't want to be 5 hours in makeup. You're all right. She could have done it again, probably, but she didn't want to. But the actress they've got, I've seen her in a lot of other things before. I'm just trying to find her name, actually. I'll find it in a minute. But she's very, very good. Her Borg Queen does remind me of Alice Krieg's, where she's got this creepy, weird, detached, superior complex, incredibly arrogant, and she just sort of believes herself superior, and she looks down on everyone very much, and she's captured that, I think, incredibly well. It's just this Annie Wershing, there you go, plays the Borg Queen. So I think she was very, very good. And I think her interactions with your favorite, Agnes, were excellent.
Yeah.
Were absolutely excellent.
I really like the scene where Dr. Jurati is sort of channeling the Borg Queen. And I thought that scene was really, really well done.
Whose hand is this? Mine. Yeah. That was good. That was good.
And I feel like they've actually found something for all the characters to do, which they didn't really do so much in season 1. Like, they were all just kind of foils to Picard. And they were kind of just there in the background. But here, I like the fact that 7 of 9 is now, the Earth president, and Jurati has interesting stuff to do. And I didn't so much like the captain of the ship that they're on becomes the captain of the Stargazer, Christos, which is obviously a reference. Rios, and which is obviously a reference to the first ship that Picard got to command as captain was the Stargazer.
It's all circular.
I didn't like circular. That. I hope she's in it more than the 2 minutes she's already been in it. But I love seeing Guinan. The thing that I hated about Guinan's appearance is the stupid, cretinous in-joke that she lives on. She works on Forward Street.
Yes. And
at number 10. Yes. So she's still in 10 Forward. Yes. That was totally
ham-fisted.
It was awful. but seeing her was brilliant. She was great, but I hated that little stupid in-joke that they did. I liked Q. I liked Q's appearance, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Q. I liked his appearance.
I love John Delancey. He's so good.
I like the way that they sort of did the deep fake of him as a younger person, and he was like, "Oh, time to catch up," and then and then he's just like, John Delancey as he is now. I thought that was well done. I also like the fact that they're not overusing Q, because if he was like a major character all through it, it would become a bit much. But I like the fact that he's got these little reminders that he's there and he's manipulating things behind the scenes, but he's not constantly in it, which I think is good.
There's also the suggestion that there's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
Because Picard says, I've seen him so many times and I've seen him unsettled and disturbed. He says, this is different. And I wonder if Q is losing his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he says the game's not over and it never ended and all this sort of stuff. But he looks distracted. He looks vague. He looks lost. And I think he might be kind of like self-destructing, and he's still able to do all the things that he could do before, but perhaps he's going mad. And what happens when a Q goes mad is a terrifying idea, as we've seen. So,
and I like the dark universe Picard that we've got to see. He's not Admiral Picard anymore. He's General Picard
of the Confederation.
Yeah, and his job, his ceremonial job was to just like, shoot a completely defenseless Borg queen, and I really like that sort of dark universe stuff that they were doing. So lots and lots of stuff in it that I really like. Bits in it irritated me, like I say, the Stargazer, the 10 forward stuff. Yeah. But these all relatively minor things.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think they've given that. So to begin with, when they set things up, so you've got Elnor. He's the first Romulan, and he's enrolled at Starfleet Academy. I think that was good. Raffi's like a surrogate mum for him, which was nice because of the carrying stuff over, which is nice, the character development, the fact that she's not connected to her own son anymore and that relationship is decayed, but she still acts like a mother, whether it's to Agnes or in this case to Elnor because he's on his own and she's a familiar figure, older and maternal, and that works. I'm like, yeah, it's believable, it works, I understand it. They've pushed things on, but they haven't gone over the top. So they've just sort of said it didn't work out between her and Seven because, and you find out over the course, they don't sort of have a long drawn out scene. It's just a short conversation between her and Picard. Raffi's saying, well, she's off doing this and I'm here and blah, 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 and that's it. And so, we'll see. But there's obviously still feelings there between them because when they're together on the ship, there's stuff going on. Agnes and Rios, there's stuff there again, but she's off getting drunk. That thing turns up, and then he's like, just let her do it. It's easier. So there's no sort of every relationship is happy, everything's fine, it's all okay. Even bloody Picard and the lady who works with him, the Romulan, Laris.
Yeah, that seemed to me to be a bit weird, I'll be honest.
It's all about his heart. That's the new frontier, apparently. That's what they're going for this season.
That's so. Although I don't, and I can see how they're drawing this theme together of past and things could have been different and all that sort of stuff. And there's a line when he's talking to Laris where she says, what is it that you really want? And his response, because he's always been about, duty and commitment to Starfleet and all those things. And she says, what is it that you really want? And his response is, the part of me that really wants is the part of me that's always had to stand in line. And I've sort of rewound it and then played that bit a whole bunch of times. And I love that line and the way that he delivered it. But other than that, the scenes between him and Laris, I found a bit strange, to be honest.
Yeah. They're pulling on that thread. You're right, but the fact that the only person he loved when he was very, very young was his mother, and then as he got older, duty came first, and he hasn't really had time for relationships. He says, "Oh, I've had relationships and I've known love," and she's like, "Yeah, but you always put it second behind everything else." And now that he has no excuses, He's still doing it because he doesn't know how to open up. And so it's a thread they're going to pull on a lot, I think, throughout this season. But now he's off on another adventure there again. So at the end of the season, I don't know if things will go back to normal, how they were, if he'll then take things forward based upon what he's learned. I don't know. But this is the second season and the third season's done, and it is the final one, which makes sense because, bless him, Patrick Stewart is now in his 80s. And it's like Christopher Lloyd is now in his 80s, and he's just done like 3 films, and now he's going to be on Star Wars. And you're like, wow, okay. There are some actors that they just know have a great screen presence and power and can be this great kind of lightning rod, and he is in the show. But I actually like Santiago Cabrera. I think he is, as Gavrios, is a very good character, but I wish they'd toned down certain things.
I agree completely. I like him as an actor, and I like him as a character.
Yes,
but I don't think they're using him correctly. And it's hard for me to put my finger on, but
I'll tell you what it is.
Go on.
They're leaning too heavily into the Han Solo of him.
Right.
So, like, even on the bridge when he's a captain, he's got a cigar.
I hated that.
It's like, oh, well, he's the captain. No, he can't. He can't do that. He wouldn't do it. It's a military vessel, essentially. It's because it's got hierarchy and everything else and rules and regulations. If it was unlit and he was not constantly chewing it, that would be fine. But I'm sure he's smoking it at one point.
Yeah, that was like, really weird.
No, if he was constantly just chewing it, and when something came up, he just tucked it in his pocket, and then when he's thinking, he takes it out and chewed it, you get it. But they were pushing him too hard into that. Be the rogue in season 1, and now season 2, you're the captain, you're in charge. Oh, but still be the rogue. I'm like, no, he's learned from all the things that he's done. He's moved on, he's progressed, he's got over the pain and this thing that he had from being first in command with the AI, with his old captain. He's learned from all of that, but they haven't evolved him. But what I really liked, it shows how great he is as an actor. In season 1, we had him as the 5 different AIs, all different parts of his personality. And when Seven gets on the ship, she's merged them all into one. Remember? And it's still him, but he looks like the mechanic who only speaks in Spanish, and he's got all the tattoos, and he's kind of grizzled, and his hair's all wild. I'm like, that is an interesting version of him, but they've kept him as the kind of clean-cut Rios version. But I don't know. I think it's, we said this with Tatiana Maslany, you believed every version was a different actress. I think if they'd kept Rios as one of the other ones, it would have been more believable, because they're pushing him too hard to still be a rogue.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
I mean, the rest have evolved. Rafi's okay. Dr. Agnes, probably not much. She still misses a cat and she has emotional problems, blah, blah, blah. But Rafi's evolved, Elnor's evolved, even Soji's evolved and now going off and doing stuff. Seven hasn't, because she can't break her rules and regulations and her programming, essentially. But I don't know. You're right. They're not quite using the character as they could. And we know that the actor is incredibly capable. So I'd like to see what they do with him in this season, because they're going to develop his relationship with this woman that he's met, this doctor on Earth. That is clearly going to be a thing, and lean into his heritage and being a father figure to the boy and all this kind of stuff. So that is good, but I wish they'd toned down some of the wild side of him.
And I hope they don't spend too long in 2024. It's just, it already was...
All season, I bet you.
It already was very ham-fisted to me, the way that they were... and again, I've said this, in previous episodes, I have no problem with TV being preachy or having a message to it and things like that, because I couldn't be a Star Trek fan if I didn't like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it just felt like they were using they're going to be using a very blunt tool to push what they want to push. And it just, I think there's better ways of doing it.
Well, it was the whole thing of, oh, look, there's homeless people. But up there's a great sign that we're going to space. and like that you've just hit everyone over the head with a hammer. The audience gets it, and you've done it way too hard. You know, you didn't need to do that. But I mean, I like what Jerry Ryan is doing. I like the fact that she doesn't have any Borg implants. She's never been a member of the Borg in this universe. And that's weird for her. Like, she's like, people like me. People like talking to me. And she's never had that before. This character, obviously, Jerry Ryan, everyone loves talking to Jerry Ryan. They'd be happy to talk to her, happy to give her directions, happy to lep her up to the top of the building. No questions asked. But Seven has never had that before. She's always made people afraid, and they're scared of her because they see the Borg implants. They know what she is or what she was, and they're terrified of her. Now, she's got emotions. She's a whole person again, and she's kind of finding stuff out about herself, which I think is quite different for the character in 7 years of Voyager, you know, compared to this.
And the thing that I really liked is there's a big problem in movies and TV at the moment where the major characters tend to be flawless. Like they you know, they were just essentially, you know, born perfect, and then they encounter no challenge that they can't instantly overcome. But something that I really liked is they were all trying to, you know, escape this sort of dark universe planet, and it looked like they were going to do it, and in the end they didn't, and they paid a really great cost for trying to get away. And I really liked that they just didn't get away, you know, scot-free, and everything was just, you know, easy and natural for them. That actually they did get caught out, and they did pay the price for trying to escape. And that was a relief to me when it wasn't just that they could just, you know, be absolutely perfect characters and perfect people and just, you know, stroll through this thing unharmed and unhindered.
My prediction is the whole of the series will be in 2024.
Right.
Running around, trying to find this Watcher, trying to work out what he knows. I already know who the Watcher is because they gave it away in the trailers. So if you haven't seen the trailers, don't watch it. I kind of hope this isn't true, but my prediction is they'll solve the thing, they'll stop the thing, they'll get Q to reset it again, they'll go back, and then Picard will then start a romantic relationship with Laris. And he'll have learnt about his heart or whatever. That's my fear. A different, unexpected version is that Q makes it worse. Q does something else that when they come back, if he lets them come back, the world's still broken, but not because of anything Q's done, but because of things they've done in the past. So that the version they come back to is their universe, but it's not the same one. And Q's like, you did this, not me. And he leaves it. And I think season 3 is going to be Q exploding, and Picard's going to have to try and stop him somehow, beat Q somehow at his own game. That's my prediction for final season.
And there is precedent of him doing that. I can't remember the name of the episode, but there's an episode where Q basically says to Picard, "What were your, you know, what's your biggest regret?" And it was having this encounter with the Nausicaan where he ended up with an artificial heart. The artificial heart thing doesn't matter anymore because we now know he's like a robot zombie now. The whole of him is artificial. Still ages normally, but he's completely he's just a robot now. Which is bizarre, right?
I know.
But there's the TNG episode where he says to Q, the thing that I regret is having this encounter with a Nausicaan and ending up with an artificial heart. And he sends him backwards in time to when he's at the academy, and he lets him have all that time again. And then it goes back forwards in time where he's still on board the Enterprise, but he's not the captain. He's just like a low
science officer. Yes.
And Riker says to him, "You've just never shown any ambition. You've always been too cautious." and then he chooses to go back in time again, and he picks that fight with the Nausicaan in order to get the artificial heart to sort of set things back to how they should be. So there is kind of that precedent in a Q episode as well, where they go back in time, or he goes back in time to try and right a wrong, and then they end up making things worse in the future. So it would be interesting to see if they took that approach.
This is why it just feels familiar. It just all of this just makes it feel very familiar. That if they're gonna go and fix the thing, they come back and it's not broken anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but we've had this many, many times. If they try and fix it and it doesn't work, and some part of it remains broken when they come back, they have to live with the new universe. That would perhaps be more interesting for me, but I don't know if it'd be that ambitious. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's interesting to see it'll be interesting to see where it's going, because other than Picard's mum thing, which I still hope I'm wrong about.
Hope so.
Other than that, it's very difficult for me to know. Very difficult for me to be able to tell where this is going to end up and what direction. And we can speculate, we can talk about these things, but it's not clear to me where the direction that they're going in.
It could be something to do with the creation of the Borg and his mother, and I don't know. I agree with you. There's this problem where, and it goes back to the Star Wars thing as well, where they just arbitrarily bring Palpatine into it because he's why not?
A historically interesting character.
Yeah,
and it's the Borg were great for a few episodes, but there's way more interesting things in the Star Trek universe than the Borg. I just don't understand why there's this obsession with writing them into everything you possibly can.
Yeah, I agree. The best species in Star Trek is not the Borg. It's when they take something that was previously a little bit silly, like, oh, he's a bloke, but he's got a little bit of plastic on his forehead and he's not different from anywhere else apart from humans. But then they make that into a very, very different race with, their own religions and their own customs and their own planet, and everything's very, very separate. And suddenly you start to look at them and you realize, yeah, they're actually very different to human beings. They're not the same as us. They're not a distant cousin. That's what Star Trek does best. The Borg, yes, it's some of the worst fears of, robbing people of their humanity and all this kind of stuff. And I guess that's probably why it's popular. It's like horror movies. It's the monster that's unstoppable. But Star Trek's always been about looking outwards, the universe, greater things, new species, new adventures, new encounters. And this just feels like a bit of a step back. So I don't know. I don't think this is as good as season one, only in that we're only 3 episodes in, to be fair, but it's only 8 episodes, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Or 10. It feels like a retread at the moment of things to me that we've seen, but with different characters. That's all it feels like at the moment. I might change my mind when we're done and we talk about it afterwards, but I'm not as excited about it as I was hoping I would be.
Right.
That's me at the moment. Who knows?
Yeah, we can revisit it once. Not definitely not on an episode by episode basis, but we can revisit it once the whole thing's over, and we can see how it turned out. Okay, well, we can adjourn on it for now, and return to do perhaps a look back on season 2 and what we think will come on season 3 once we have a bit more information. But I'm still going to watch it. I still like it, but I'm worried. It just feels like something we've seen before. It's the one show that in part because they're bringing out an episode by episode rather than just dropping the whole series in one go. Yeah, but it's enough for me to think on a Friday, it's new Picard Day. It's Picard Day. Yeah, Captain Picard Day. Hey, it's Picard Day. Put it on.
Excellent. Right. So have you seen Picard season 2? If so, get in touch. Let us know what you think of it so far. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Come and talk to us on the Facebook group and email us and all of that usual gubbins. But we'll be back next month. But in the meantime, it's good night for me.
And it's good night for me.
Good night.
Good night.